Hey, what is up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are having a fantastic day and welcome back to another lesson inside of Swift development. Now for today's video, I really want to answer a request from a video last time about how to implement expandable sections inside of a UI table view. So let me show you exactly what that looks like over here by clicking on these close buttons like that, close, and then I can also reopen all of these sections by simply hitting the open button, obviously. So this functionality right here really makes your UI pop a whole lot more. And if you are able to implement it inside of your app and also make it, make sense, then this is something that your users will definitely appreciate. So for today's lesson, let's see exactly how this is implemented right now. All right, so let's dive right back into Xcode, and I'm going to run this project that I have opened up, and let's see what I have inside of this simulator. Well, basically we have a bunch of headers, a bunch of names inside of each of these sections, and the ability to show and remove all of these index paths inside of my cells. So this project comes from the last lesson inside of this contacts application. So make sure to go watch that video and download the source code before continuing on today. So having said that, let's try to move on by implementing some type of functionality inside of the header for each one of my sections. And the way we are going to do this very easily is to go inside of this method called view for header. And what I really want to be able to do is to have a button inside of a header so that I can execute some code. So inside of this function here, I'm going to replace the label that we have currently, which is this over here, that header label, with a button instead. So let's say let button equals UI button, and I'll use the constructor of dot type. So type, and we'll use dot system, which will give me some kind of highlight when I tap on the button. So you can return this button right now and remove all of this label stuff down below, but you won't be able to see it until you set perhaps some kind of title on here. And I will say close because that's what the initial state will be with a state of normal. So if I do this, I should be okay, but let me just go ahead and add the height for header method. So height for header, and return something like 34. That way the header is not going to be totally scrunched down. Now, whenever you encounter this, you can click the red button, hit the fix, it'll provide that override. I'm not really sure exactly why Xcode 9 doesn't do that automatically for you, but that's just what we have to do to fix our problem. So having our changes with the button, we see this close button now inside of each one of these section headers. And to make it more visibly interesting, let's do something with this button. Perhaps set the background color. So background color equal dot yellow, and then also button set title color equal to dot black, like that, for the control state of normal. This way our button will be a little bit more interesting. So let me change that to 36 height and run our application one more time. This way we have a yellow border or yellow background and blue or black for the close button. If you wanted to change the button's title label font, you can do this as well with a bold system font of 14. So that's what we have so far. And now is the interesting part of the lesson where we have to actually execute the closing and expanding of our sections. And we're going to kind of get started here by using a target action on this button. So let's say down here, button at target. And this is going to occur whenever I tap on the button, and that's kind of specified by this event of touch up inside. And the target is going to be self. The selector will be pound selector. And let's see, this method will be called handle open close, I suppose, or expand close, whatever you want to call this method. You just want to copy that, move all of this away. And down here, you can simply say at objc function and handle expand close. So printing, trying to expand and close section. And we will try to run it right now. So make that a lowercase r. And every time I tap on these section headers right now, it's going to automatically print out that statement down in the console below. So really good start there. And now what we have to figure out how to do is to actually close all of these sections. So what I mean is you want to just simply remove all of these rows like that and then reinsert them inside of that section. So the way you do that is to simply delete all the rows inside of that particular section inside of your entire table view. So in other words, let's see, we'll try to close the section first by deleting the rows. And down here, you will simply make a call to TableView. And this guy has this method called delete rows. So in order to make this work, you have to pass in all of these sections or all the rows per section that you want to delete. And so let's just kind of follow the example from last video where we remove everything from the first top section. And that's kind of look like this over here. So you can say for row in two-dimensional array. And remember, two-dimensional array, it actually holds all the names for each one of my sections. So the way you are going to attain all of your rows for the first section is to use bracket 0 dot indices like that. And you can simply say print out, I don't know, 0 and a row, I suppose. And you'll see what that does down below. You'll get section 0 and then row 0 all the way up to row 6. So click on that, you get all that good stuff. So let's remove all of these rows now. And to do that, we will first have to collect all of our rows inside of this array called index paths equals index path, wrap this with a bracket to get an empty array of index paths. And inside of here, you want to call index paths dot append onto this new index path array or object that you create that you want to remove. And we'll just construct it quickly like that. Use this, use the row section, row and section is 0. And to make this easier, in just a little bit, let's say let section equals 0. And we'll replace section here with this 0 and this section over here. And this guy will be index path, and pump that in there with a lowercase I. And finally, we're now able to pump in the index paths inside of this delete rows call. So let's uncomment that out. Copy that, paste that in there. And for the row animation, I'll just use fade. You can use whatever you want, and it'll look, you know, kind of like the animation that you specified. So let's see what this does, and I believe it's going to crash. So let me hit the close, and we get the crash over there. So if you look at this crash, it's kind of confusing because it tells you about like the rows that you're deleting, and the section matches with the incorrect number now. So basically what's happening is that when you delete all of these rows in the top section, you are also going to call this method over here. So let me rerun this. And basically it's going to execute the delete, and it's going to try to figure out how many rows are in each section. So let me remove that, put that back in. So I'm going to hit close, and then we're going to delete all these rows, but it's going to run into 110 again. And at this point in time, it's going to say that the section of 0 has 6 or 7 rows still, but that's no longer true because you just deleted all those rows. Hence, when you continue, the application just crashes like this over here. So there's a couple of ways of fixing this, and the first attempt that you might try is to just simply remove the names from the array. In other words, you can, you know, perhaps say two-dimensional array dot section, or use that and say remove all, and then that'll remove all of the names inside of this array. So let me fix this. So two-dimensional array is not a mutating member, and basically this guy, you have to say var in order to mutate anything inside of it. So a let is a constant and a var is a variable that allows modification. So here we go. We're going to hit the close and delete the rows. So delete, and all of those rows kind of disappear. And you see when we hit close, it doesn't really respond because up here we're actually using this section number of 0. Okay, so the first thing to fix here obviously is to allow for closure of all of these sections inside of my table view. And the way I'm going to do this is to head back into view for header in section, and this button right here, you can actually tell what you're clicking on inside of handle expand close if you specify the button like this. So UI button, and what I'm going to do is to say button.setTag. Is that a property? I think tag is what it's called now. And I will set it equal to section like that. And eventually down here, I can say print, let's say button.tag like that, and run my application again. So basically the tag is going to be the section in which I'm trying to expand or close. And so if I hit close like that, you see this 0 right here. And if I close the last section, you see this 3. So that's how we specify the section. And why don't we just turn that into button.tag like that, remove that print statement, and we should be okay. So once we run this modified code, our application will remove all the rows per section like this, down below, this, and this as well. So pretty good stuff. And now the question is, how do I even expand these rows again now that they're closed? Well, there are a couple of ways of doing this, and I'm going to show you the most straightforward way of accomplishing this task first. And the way we're going to actually modify our application is to not remove all of the names here. So we're going to comment that out, and we'll rerun our application. So the crash that we had before is going to come back now. And let me show you how to implement the correct solution here. So click here, it's going to crash. So that's really good. That's kind of what I expect. And again, the crash is occurring because inside of this method here, number of rows in section, it's trying to kind of make the numbers equal to each other after you delete the rows. It should be 0, but inside of here, you're still returning like 6 or 7 for the top row. So how are we going to make the fix here? Well, we're going to modify the way we're defining our names to be a little bit smarter. So you see up here where we have this 2-dimensional array thing, I'm going to remove these names that we're not using. And I'm going to introduce a data structure to help me kind of track when a section is opened or closed. So let's do it by creating a new file. That's a pretty good idea. And I'll create a Swift file. I'll call it expandable names. Sounds like a good structure for me. And right here, we'll create a new struct, call it a class, wherever you want. And here we will just say expandable names. All right, now this class here is going to have 2 properties. And the first property is, is expanded equals to true. Actually, I don't think it matters what the default value is. So let's just say var is expanded, let it be a Boolean. And that's going to keep track of whenever I click on something. And the next variable is going to be a let constant of names equals some kind of, say, let it be a type string like that, keeping track of all the names per section. So now that I have this, you can build your project, head back into view controller. And at the very top over here, I'm going to use that struct to define these names instead of these raw strings. And what I mean is I can just say expandable names in here, use the constructor of something. So let me get the constructor out down here perhaps of expandable names and use this guy. So Swift is not always the smartest with the autocomplete. Sometimes there are some little smart tricks that you can do to get the constructor out. So is expanded starts off as at the very beginning as true because these sections are expanded. So make sure to modify your code if you want it to be closed in the beginning. And the names, I'm going to use this right here. Copy that, paste that in there. And now I have a couple of more copying and pasting to do. And I'll replace all of the names with the correct sections of this over here. And paste, let's cut that. And paste that in there. Finally, we will cut this and paste this into the very last section. So once I have this, I can remove all those commas and try to build now. And everything should almost be kind of okay. So a couple of things that won't work right now is because the 2-dimensional array is now this new structure of expandable names. This guy that we're always trying to figure out, like all these indices, we can just say dot names. And this is just the handle show path method, which is on the very top. It's not very important why you have to do this. Well, it actually is, but you just have to add in dot names everywhere that we're selecting this stuff. So let's see. Over here, I believe we have to say dot names, and then over here is also dot names like that. And I think we are good to go. So we're getting the names out of the expandable names class now, and that's why we have to make these modifications. Okay, so now that we have that done, we can crash our app again, and let me show you why I introduced this expandable name struct now. So that's going to keep track of what's happening every time I say handle, expand, and close. So what I mean is every time I click on one of these close buttons, I'm going to go inside of my array, my two-dimensional array, and I can say section, and then I'm going to say is expanded equals to something. So let's make this a little bit easier to follow and say let is expanded equals, let's see, two-dimensional array. For the section that I'm clicking on, basically this top section, I'm going to say dot is expanded equals that, and let's just modify that to be correct, expanded, and I'm going to reverse what's inside of that array by saying not is expanded like that. That just reverses the boolean for me, and I should be okay once I have this. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out from this value here how many rows I need to return inside of number of rows. So what I'm going to do is say if, let's see, two-dimensional array, the section that I'm clicking on, and if it is expanded, I'm going to return 0. So if it's expanded, I think if it's not expanded, it's going to return 0, because if it's not expanded, so not expanded with the exclamation mark, that means it's closed, so we return 0. So let's see if this actually works by running the application one more time. And we should see that if we close it, then the actual section will close, because we are returning 0 whenever the section is closed. So hit the run, everything should be okay. Just closes correctly. And so that's kind of how it works. And if I close that. And now I believe there's a problem. If I try to close over here, it crashes again. So what's really going on is when I hit the close button again, I'm reversing the expanded property. So now it is actually expanded. So down here it's not returning 0, but instead it's returning like 7 for the top section. So the way we're going to finally fix this issue is to kind of fix the deletion by actually using the insertion, insert rows if the section is closed. So let me kind of do this right here. If is expanded, I will insert the rows, and let's see, index paths, and this will be fade, I suppose, and otherwise we will just use this down here. So I'm not totally sure if this is the correct boolean, logic that we need, but this should correctly insert and delete. So click on there, so we get a crash. So I know that this is probably going to need to be reversed like that and like that. So it's a little tricky, because based on how we're changing this boolean and what order we change it in, this thing might not always be the correct grammar. And let's hit the close, hit the close, hit the close, 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 close. Okay, so that's how you implement the expandable header functionality. And if you wanted to change the title of the label right here so that it says open and closed based on what you're clicking on and what the state is, you can simply say over here, let's see, the button that we're clicking on handle, expand, and close, button.set title, and the string will be based on, let's see, let me move it down here instead so I can use this is expanded, and we'll use ternary operators again, and we'll say open, and then otherwise close, and this will be dot normal for the state like that. And I might have to reverse this depending on what the logic of is expanded is. And let's see, so we'll hit close, it says open, so that looks good, close and open. And down here, close, close, and then close and open and close. So I believe there's one bug that I'm going to leave it up to you on how to fix, which is the show index path button. It still crashes, and that's because inside of show index path, See, show next path. We haven't implemented the logic to actually check if the section is expanded or not. So it's always doing this reload improperly inside of each one of these sections. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for today's video on how to implement these expandable sections inside of a UI table view. Now, there are many various solutions to this problem, so this is just one of the quicker answers to how to implement this feature. Now, if you are interested in more Swift development, make sure to check out the brand new core data course using the links down below. And if you want to download the source code for today's video, the links are down below as well. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and also consider subscribing to the channel for more lessons like this. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye, guys.